I used to do this until I realized this one choice was costing me hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you actually want to grow your brand, growing your own weed is killing you from any real growth. If you don't do this one thing regarding proper outsourcing, it'll be the difference from making $100,000 a month versus the low thousands per month. So from 2018 all the way to 2022, I had my own licensed grow in downtown LA, and this is where I learned these lessons from. We grew a lot of great weed there, don't get me wrong, we had some amazing genetics. However, there's a lot of fires to put out all the time. And I don't mean literal fires, I mean metaphorically speaking. And this could be anything from bad harvests, employee issues, employees not showing up, robberies, inspections, dealing with the fire department, dealing with the police. The police would just pop up. One time the fire department was just driving down the street. Their office was a few blocks away. They just happened to be driving down our street, just pulled over. Everyone on the truck just jumps off. They just walk up to the door, knock on the door. I open the door. I'm like, yes, can I help you? They're like, yeah, we were just driving down the street. We're neighbors over here. We actually just wanted to come by and just walk through the facility and just see what it's like. And I'm thrown off because I didn't know if this was an inspection or what. And they came in, they said they want to just see what the layout's like, understand what it is, because in case there is a fire in there, they want to know what they're walking into. They want to know where the back exits are. They want to know what the internal structure is like. And then from them showing up like that, it caused them to ask other questions. Now they were concerned about the big ass CO2 tank we had in the front. They were wondering if we had our CO2 permits, all this other stuff, which then in order to get the CO2 permits, we had to have certain building safety regulations dialed in. The building and safety department didn't have a cannabis certification. So it was like this whole rat race of bullshit, all because the fire department just happened to be driving by and wanted to stop in randomly. That's just one random story, but we could talk about the 10 different robberies that happened while I owned the grow. We could talk about the crackheads out on the street. We could talk about the bad harvest, the mold that you might encounter every once in a while, getting bad genetics, dealing with the employee issues that come along with it, because you need a solid employee team to grow the weed. But what happens is, as with any business, employees is the hardest aspect of running any business. So in doing so, you have all this bandwidth that's allocated now to employees, to inspections, to operations, to robberies, to legal issues, to renewals of your license, to just the general operation of the grow, making sure all your supplies are there, dealing with the genetics, dealing with your harvest, your takedown, trimmers, having the trimmers come into the facility every couple weeks. So there's a lot of moving parts. And when you have all these moving parts happening, if you're owning the brand, you can't fully focus on running the grow as well as running the brand the way you need to. And I've seen this time and time again. People will come in thinking just because they own the grow, they got the greatest genetics there are, they got great quality coming out of the grow, that it's an automatic win for why their brand should be on top. But what happens is their focus is so dedicated to that grow, they're unable to spend the time and focus that it takes to really scale up your brand. And if you're trying to do both, the only way that works is if you have a dedicated team operating your grow full-time while you're focused on building and scaling your brand full-time. And to try to do both is just a losing battle. So the other big issue when owning your own grow and you're trying to actually scale a brand at the same time is you have to sell all that weed from the grow no matter what. Whether that batch came out amazing, whether it came out mediocre, whether it came out subpar, because even if you have a consistent grow, not every batch is the same as the previous batch. And you could get it dialed in, get that consistency really good, but there's still gonna be some times where even if the batch is good, you might hit some snags on the sales. So hypothetically speaking, let's say that all that was solved. You had the best employee team in the world. You never had any inspections to deal with. You didn't have any issues with the city. You didn't have any lawyers to deal with. You didn't have any robberies. Let's just assume all that's out the window. All you got to do is just grow the good weed that you're dialed into and sell it. Just that alone is a huge undertaking. Think about when you sell the weed, you have a fresh harvest every 2 weeks. That means now your focus is shifting to making sure that harvest is sold. Because even though you own the brand, if you own the grow too, you're not going to sell every single pound of weed through your brand as quick as your grow is producing it. In order to do so, you're gonna have to sell a lot of that weed in bulk. So now not only is your focus diverted on making sure the grow operates properly, but now you gotta make sure you sell all that weed in a quick enough time at a market price against all the other competition in the market. And that alone is a huge focus. It's a full-time job on its own. So you're either gonna have someone else doing that, which is another thing to manage, and then potentially you have to drop your prices so now you can leave room on the bone for someone else to sell it for you. But there's a lot of issues with that. They might not be cashing it out fully up front. Now you got to give it to them on the arm. You're fronting weed out. Now something happens with that, they're gonna come back with a story to you like, oh shit, the dude robbed me. This dude fucking blah, blah, blah. The cops pulled me over, blah, blah, blah. All this shit, you know what I mean? So now you have to deal with the unknowns. You have to deal with selling the weed. You'll have to deal with the market conditions of selling the weed. So let's say it's around the holidays. We all know if you're in this industry, the holidays is the slowest fucking time to sell weed. And I say that with as much animosity because we all get nervous when it comes to the holiday season. From Thanksgiving until New Year's, that time is dead. It's dead. If you're selling any weed, not only are you lucky, but count your blessings, because that's where all the robberies happen too. Because all these people that are used to making their money consistently when times are good, those slow times, it's prime for robberies. People will set you up. The people that have been buying off you consistently and everything's going smooth, that's when your guard's down. That's when they come in from the other side and they fuck you over. So my point being is, not only is it risky to constantly be selling bulk pounds every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, it's time consuming. It takes your bandwidth. Certain times of the year are way riskier than the others. Your focus just is not there. Plus you got all the bullshit you got to deal with from the grow too. So just this alone, even if you have partners, it's still gonna overlap and it's still gonna take time away from your focus if your focus is growing your brand. And in order to really truly grow your brand, you need to focus on that. You need to focus on it like it's a sole project, like that's all you're working on. And I can't stress this enough, because if you try to split your focus, your brand is gonna fall to the side, because that grow is gonna become more important in the sense that there's gonna be all these fires to put out, things pop up randomly without you expecting it. And then what? You're screwed if you don't attend to them. And by attending to them, you're taking focus off what needs to be focused on with your brand. So after 3.5 years of owning my licensed grow, I was relieved when I finally got it sold. And when I sold it, part of me felt like I was detaching from having my own grow. And there was a lot of aspects that having your own grow is positive for. I had a place I could always bring new genetics to. I could test stuff out. I had control over making any changes or dialing in any production stuff that I wanted to. However, it came at a large cost of all this overhead, all this risk, all this struggle, all this diversion of my focus. It just wasn't worth it in the end for what I wanted to do. And don't get me wrong, if you're a true grower that really loves being in the grow room, that's for you, and you deserve to be in a grow. That's where you want to be in the grow. That's not me though. I wasn't the main grower. I never claimed to be the main grower. I just know a lot about growing in a lot of different ways. And my role at my grow was not only managing the production of it, but making sure all the sales happens, getting all the genetics in there, making sure that I could sell it once it's grown, and then dealing with all the fires that had to be put out, dealing with the employees. You know, a couple times our head grower quit. I had to find a new grower. I had to get someone new in there. We had to change our whole program. When you get a new grower in, it's like having a new chef in the kitchen. Not everything is gonna take shape the exact same way it used to operate, and they're going to want to make their changes because that's their growing style. So now every time you get a new grower in there, you're running the risk of one thing changing, and now your whole entire program is off. And now let's say that sets you back on your quality or your yields, or they put in some new genetics that aren't going to sell right just because you get a better yield on them. Any number of things can happen, especially when you're switching growers. And again, like I said, the human aspect to it, the employee aspect to it, there's no safe answer to that. It's the biggest issue in any industry is employees. So with a grow, you need a wide team of employees to manage that properly. And that right there is a huge variable that's just never going to be solved. So for me, what I found worked best for me, instead, I partnered with my friend's grow. After I sold my grow, I partnered with my friend's grow. He's an amazing grower. He only cares about growing quality weed. He doesn't even want to deal with the sales. And that's the flip side to it. If you're a real grower and you're doing your thing and you're dialed in and you got your system dialed in, you got your team dialed in, that's all you want to be doing is sitting there growing, getting that dialed in. But if you have to go now sell the weed, whether that's the bulk pounds or run the brand or any of that, it's just going to take your focus away. So this partnership that I developed with my friend's grow allowed him to grow the weed, and then I sold it all. I sold all the bulk flower, and then also I put what I needed in my brand. And so this works amazing. Whenever I have any input, maybe changing the genetics, or maybe this batch didn't come out the way the previous batch did, any number of things, I can just let them know that. I'm not dealing with the employee issues. I'm not dealing with the robberies that they have to face. I'm not dealing with the inspections they got to deal with. I'm not dealing with the electric bill. Bro, at my grow, my electric bill was over $30,000-$40,000 a month. My rent was $32,000 a month. So just that alone, then you add in your labor costs, you're about $100K a month. So if you have a bad harvest, if you have a robbery that month, those bills don't stop. You still got to pay those bills. But as a brand, you're not tied to that lease. You're not tied to that electric bill. I had to personally guarantee the lease at my grow. So like I said, our rent was a little over $30,000 a month, put it about $350,000 a year. I had to personally guarantee a 5-year lease. So do the math. What's that, like $1.6 million? So I was personally on the hook to pay it $1.6 million to the landlord, whether that business was profitable or it failed. Didn't matter. That lease had to get paid. So when I ended up selling my grow, part of that was transitioning the lease into the new owner's name. So they took over that personal guarantee. They re-signed that lease out of my name. So just that alone took $1.5 million burden off my plate. Regardless, like I said, that grow could have burnt down. I still would have had to pay that rent. There might have been some insurance safety net there, but regardless, I'm still on the hook for that personal guarantee. That's how commercial leases work. So there's a lot of underlying aspects where people just think like, oh, you're a weed grower, you must be rich. Or if you're good at growing weed, you can have a good brand. It's not like that. It's not like that at all. And if anyone tells you differently, I welcome you to leave some comments, let me know your perspective on it. But I've seen too many times, many times, endless amounts of times, stressed out growers, stressed out workers at the grow, tons of issues at the grow that you got to deal with that just make the energy and the vibe at the grow, it's just not a fun place to be at, especially if things aren't dialed in. I can't stress this enough. If your main focus is owning a successful brand, don't divert your focus by also trying to chase down the licenses and chase down the grow facility. You don't need that, especially in the beginning. The best strategy is to scale your brand independently, make some good partnerships with 1, 2, or 3 grows, and just be consistent. Dial in one grow for a certain strain, dial in another grow for a different strain if you need to, but just get a consistent grow partnership going. And this is going to save you millions of dollars. It's going to save you your focus. It's going to allow you to really build something special. And this is important. It's not what some people think, where they can just put some plants in the ground and money grows off trees. Having a grow is the quickest way to go bankrupt. And I can't stress that enough. So keep this in mind. Outsourcing is the key, especially in the beginning, but only with the right partners. Because if it's not the right facility, if it's not the right grow, if it's not the right team, they need to be able to have the right genetics in there. Ideally, they should have an R&D room, so that way you could introduce new genetics and they could test it out, do some test runs. But that R&D room is important, because if they don't have the R&D room, they're not going to want to scale it up into the production, and they run the risk of, if you brought them some new clones and they put it in just straight in the production rooms, it might not yield right, it might have poor canopy coverage, it might bring diseases into the room, it might not mesh well with the feeding regimen of the other genetics in the room. The environmental aspects of that room might not be good for that specific strain versus the other strains in the room. So these are some of the reasons why an R&D room is super important. Even if it's a 4 light room, 6 light room, 8 light room, it doesn't even need to be big. The R&D room at my friend's grow is 12 lights. So it's a little bit bigger than it needs to be, but it's perfect. You know, I can bring in clones all the time. I bring in new genetics all the time. They just throw it into the R&D room with the next batch, and it's secure, it's quarantined, so it's not going to affect the other production rooms. You're able to really map out the details. How much is that strain yielding? Is it hard to grow? Does it grow well with these other strains? So when you're partnering with a grow, you want to allow the flexibility to introduce new genetics. That way you can get something unique in there for your brand, and that way the grow, you're not relying on the grow to just have whatever genetics they have and whatever they're growing. You might luck out and find a grow that has the genetics that you want, but don't rely on that. Try to find a grow where you can grow with them, and where you're not in there, you know, feeding the plants and doing this and that, but you can actually lend your insight, be like, hey, the market's shifting. These candy strains aren't selling as quick as they used to. Let's try some new strains. Let's bring in some OG cuts. Let's bring in some breeding projects. I got a breeder over here who's doing a bunch of breeding. They did some pheno hunts. I've tried some of the stuff. It's really good. They're gonna bring some clones and let me, you know, share them with you guys. So think about it. If you have access to other friends that are breeding, they're doing breeding projects, they're crossing unique strains, they're doing pheno hunts, now you can go about, explore new strains, test them out, and if you have access to those genetics, you can now bring them over to your friend's grow, to your partner grow, put it in the R&D room, see how they could grow it, and if it's something you want to move forward with, they scale that up in the production room. And granted, the grow is going to have their own metrics on whether or not a certain genetic is worth growing to them, but as long as it passes those key points, they're going to put it in their commercial. So as long as it checks those boxes, then the grow is probably more than willing to scale that up and put it into production for you. So having the right cultivation partners is super, super important, especially if you're a young brand, if you're not fully established. And that's how this strategy really works. So once you get some significant growth to your brand and you've built out your foundation and it's solid, then you can start thinking about owning licenses and owning the operations. And that's where, again, making these strategic partnerships might be the better way to get into an ownership position of a license. Instead of buying a brand new grow, or instead of buying a grow off somebody, why not partner with that same grow that you've been working with? You know, offer to invest some money into it if they're looking for money. Maybe they have a space next door that they can expand into, and you want to invest some money and help that build out in exchange for some equity in that license. However, they're still running the license. They're dealing with the compliance, they're dealing with the taxes, they're dealing with the employees. You still don't have to do it, but you're technically an owner of the license now. So see how you can grow into these positions, and you can start with a low barrier of entry, take a lot of that risk off, allow others to carry that risk, and now you can focus on growing your brand, making $100,000 a month in monthly recurring revenue. That should be your first goal, and then growing from there. So the most important part when you're setting up partnerships is making sure, in any instance, it doesn't have to be with growing and branding or whatever, in any kind of partnership situation, you want the two partners to bring something different to the table. It doesn't make sense for two growers to partner up on a grow. In fact, it's a horrible idea. Because then what happens is this grower wants to do one thing this way and this grower wants to do it the other way, and now they start butting heads. So instead, if you have a grower and a brand owner, that's a perfect partnership, because the brand owner doesn't want to grow and the grower doesn't want to run the brand. So let them play their parts, and now you guys win as a team. And just remember, if you try to do all this yourself, maybe it's possible, and there are some people that do pull it off. I don't want to make it seem like it's impossible, but it's not the smartest strategy. And you can really focus your time, attention, and resources if building a nationwide brand, a worldwide brand is your focus. You don't want to be sitting there dealing with a grow putting out fires every day. And most importantly, as a brand, you got to be on your feet. You got to be nimble. You got to be able to move around. You got to be able to travel. You got to be able to hit these events in these different regions. You for sure cannot do that if you got to grow. That's like leaving your kid at home, leaving a 5-year-old kid at home while you go on a week-long trip. How the fuck is that going to work? It's not, so understand playing your part, especially in a younger stage of a brand, scaling it up. Be hyper focused on that. Do what you need to do. Don't try to wear all the hats. Don't try to be the king of the mountain. Don't try to be the big dog on top, being like, oh, I own the grow, I own the manufacturing, I own the retail, I own the brand. It's silly in my opinion. Focus on one thing, do it good, and then start to scale from there after you got the first thing dialed in. So that's my take on this. Why it's important to focus on your brand instead of trying to focus on owning the whole supply chain just does not make sense. So if you're serious about building your brand, I made a free guide. It's step by step. It really walks you through from what you want to focus on when mapping out your brand, the execution of how to execute on the brand, and from there, I'll see you in the next video.